morning to everyone, especially to Sir Syed Ashrin. My name is Nasharini binti Muhammad Nasir, and today I'm going to present about East Asia, the cultural and political influences. There are Chinese empires. The foundation of Chinese culture started in the 2000 BC. China civilization developed in Huanghe Valley based on wealth of agricultural surpluses and craft skills. This control much of the lower Huanghe and Changjiang Basin. So as you look at the second table, in 1122 until 256 before century, Zhao dynasty used Iron Age technology, irrigation and deeper ploughing to support economic growth. During the period, improved transportation opened wider geographic trades that caused attacks from outside. And during political and upheavals of this period, Kongfuzi, which is Confucius, an administrator, called for better trained and more able managers to focus orderly conduct and proper relations in all social contexts. His knowledge later on had introduced merit-based system. And during this period, Daoism, the teaching of Lao Tzu, disdained the Confucian hierarchical system for organizing society, so which they prefer a return to local village-based communities with only a little government interference, and they apparently opposing concepts of yin and yang. As an example, male and female, positive and negative, the dark side and the sunny side. We move forward to 220 BC until 206 before century, which is Qin dynasty takes place. They remain strict law to unite the separate feudal states into a centralized and culturally uniform empire with standard written script. They also added spiritual dimension to materialistic Confucianism and more systematic framework to Daoism. This resulted in literary and artistic brilliance, religious tolerance, and foreign trade. The next 3 centuries, Tang Dynasty spread Chinese influences into the northeast parts of modern China, Korean, Japan, and northern Vietnam. In 1200s, Zen Buddhism centered in meditation and moment insight in mundane activities which did not rely on spiritual. It only depends on personal experience landed in Korea and Japan. While during in AD 600s, Lamaistic Buddhism established in Tibet, where the combination of Indian Buddhism and Tibetan rituals. Lamaism had continuing impact on these Chinese dynasties that established political control over Tibet. On the 6th table, the Mongols invaded China in 1200s. Kublai Khan, which is a Mongol leader, and his descendant rules as a Chinese emperors, driving China into the center of native Chinese intellectual and economic development southward. They also rule much of modern Russia. This caused many Mongols intermarried with the Chinese. In the 1300s, resentment of the new rulers towards the Mongols and disruption of taxes imposed, crop failures and famines had opened the way for rebellion, and they established the new dynasty, which is Ming Dynasty, in 1368. The Mongols invaded China and the Ming Dynasty takes place. During the 1367 until 1644, Ming Dynasty takes place. China's economy, literature, and education being advanced. Admiral Cheng Ho, during 1405 until 1433, had ventured beyond India to Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Eastern Africa, and Madagascar. This situation by Admiral Cheng Ho succeed the king as known as Manchu Dynasty, ruled from 1644 to 1911. By the mid of 1700s, the Chinese realm had expanded to its farthest limit in the northeast Mongolia, Xinjiang, Tibet, Burma, and Taiwan. While in 1820, China was the world's wealthiest empire, producing nearly 1/3 of the world GDP. But later that time, a decline political and economic power caused by poor internal government faced with Western influences and conflicts. Second part, which is Japanese isolationism. The non-Chinese people, which we call the Ainu, were the earliest inhabitants but retreated as other groups invaded through Korea. The principle of Shinto religion built on animism, ancient myth and customs. It is a pantheistic religion which involves emperor worship and Japanese superiority. This become the instrument of political control. In Shintoism, both living and non-living objects possessed by spirits, which example Mount Fuji being given special reverence. Japanese tend to avoid mountains in reverence to nature gods, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Not to forget, Japanese Buddhism tolerates this Shintoism, followed by Taoism and Confucianism. From the 1100s, the feudal lords, Japanese emperors, took over the imperial administration and armed samurai warriors under a shogun acted over the heads of the powerless court. The shoguns dominated Japan and maintained its isolation from the rest of the world. In 1867, the last shogun resigned, so the Meiji regained his position as titular head of the government. While in 1889, the emperor became a figurehead and political power was taken by the leading figures in parliament. Third part, which is Korean origins. Koreans are based on sense of nationhood, on shed blood, ancestry, ethnically. After the Mongol invasion, Confucian principles of government adopted and Buddhism displaced as major religion in Korea. In 1392 until 1910, Yi dynasty founded in Seoul ruled the Kingdom of Korea, even there was an interference of China in 1644. In the year of 1894 to 1895, rebels opposed the Korean government. Newly strengthened Japanese forces overran Korea. Japanese has defeated both Chinese and Russian attempts to aid the Koreans. This was because of the close proximity attracted aggressive interest from growing military power. And in 1910, Japan has annexed fully Korea. Now Koreans subscribe to mixed religion, which are Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism and Christian in uniquely Korean way. China has resisted colonization. You can see from the year of 1557, China resisted attempts to set up trade or political links. The only place they would allow to do business was through the southern port of Guangzhou, and British East India Company demanded for Chinese tea and paid in silver, but then they replaced by paying in opium. In the year of 1796, King's Emperor banned importing opium into China to preserve privilege of the trade position. In the 1800s, British found the opium where it shipped mostly from India. By 1819, the opium trade stimulated a lower price but increased value of tea exports and required payment in silver, which has drained the resources. The Chinese official reasserted the policy of forbidding the opium imports. Opium War had occurred in the year of 1841 and lasted for 1 year until 1842. However, China suffered a defeat and had to sign the Treaty of Nanjing. This treaty gave British the Hong Kong. Meanwhile, the United States and European nations won the right to trade in 5 ports. The 5 ports are Shanghai, Canton, Ningpo, Foochow and Amoy. This affected the internal political structure and weakened the King Emperor's authority. The disrupted Chinese Republic started in 1912, where it replaced the Qing dynasty. Right, the Sun Yat-sen and his Kuomintang party claimed overall political power. In 1920 until 1930, last for a decade, China attempted to reunify under a common government that led to strife among local warlords, which a communist rebellion and a Japanese attacks. In 1933, main Japanese invasion of China began with expansion out of the northeast where Japanese army once occupied in the earlier 19,000. In 1937, they declared a general war, which we call as Second Sino. Kuomintang and Chinese communists united and cross-strait relation was established. Japan aggression, which started in 1867, Meiji, the government of Japan take a major action to prevent world domination by the Western countries. By the end of 1800s, a new military power had enabled Japan to conquer Taiwan and Korea. They won war against Russia and able to take Manchuria, which is now northeastern China. And the government also encouraged for modernization, which strengthened their economics. Manufacturing was a basis during the period, and the example of products were iron, steel, ships, and textile. In the early of 1900, Japanese governments become more democratic. Social group established political parties and also labor union. Japan was well known because they produce cheap goods and they have great quality. In 1930, there was an economic depression caused by other country to raise the tariff against Japanese imported goods, since Japanese had a very cheap goods but great quality, right? So because of this economic depression, the Japanese military leaders and Zaibatsu is an elite families, caused an internal pact between them. So the Japanese military leaders took over political powers and shifted the industrial production to military equipments. So in the same year, 1930, Japan took over parts of China, invading territories claimed by the Soviet Union, and fight across the Pacific during World War II. In 1941, Japan made a surprise attack on the US naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. But in 1945, Japan had lost in the war due to the US bombing and post-war dismantle. During World War II, Japanese military promote themselves as the master race, but other countries in East Asia were very worried of Japan because their own harsh manners. They once made women as sex slaves, prisoners, and civilians as forced labours. In 1990, Japanese government apologized to the occupied countries. So that's all for my presentation as of today. I hope all of you understand, but if there's any question, you can just ask after this. Thank you so much.